We continue now at the top of Daf Samach Aleph Amud Beis in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 61b. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing a brisa which seemed to be saying that when there was no mizbeach, some kind of kachim is not disqualified. The Gemara ended up saying on the previous summit that brisa might have been talking about kachim which are not disqualified, even though kachim should be disqualified if there's no mizbeach. But the Gemara explained on the previous summit there is actually a mizbeach in that situation in the brisa. The brisa is referring to a situation where the Mishkan was taken down while they were traveling in the Midbar, but the mizbeach was actually still present, as the Gemara now continues and says, "Ula'achar sheyifraku halavim es ha-mishkan." After the Levium took down the Mishkan, but again there still actually was a mizbeach, and that's why the kachim, even kachim, were not disqualified. And the Gemara continues and says, "Ma'u detema." Now, what might you have said? Why would you even think they would be disqualified? You might think if silahu biyotze they should be disqualified because it should be no different than yotze. Yotze means that it leaves the proper area. Here there is no area because the Mishkan was taken down. So maybe one would think that would be the disqualification. Kamash Malon, that's what the Bryce is teaching us. There is no such disqualification. The Gemara says, Ve'ema hachinami, but why don't we say that indeed there is such a disqualification? And to that the Gemara says, Amar Kra, the Pasuk says, V'nasa Oel Moed. It says that the Oel Moed will travel, again talking about the Mishkan traveling through the Midbar, but we learn from that Pasuk, Afal Pisha Nasa, even though it's traveling, Ohel Moed, who it still has the status of Oel Moed, and therefore it's not considered a situation of Yotze, of leaving the Mechitza, leaving the proper area. Rashi explains, Ma'u detema, what might you have said? Kilomar, what the Gemara means to say is as follows, V'lo achila mishenekar hamizbeach asal ashmi'inon. The Bryce is not teaching us achila, consumption of these karbanos, after the mizbeach is uprooted. Ela achilas kachim below kloim asal ashmi'inon. It's teaching us that one can eat kachim even though there are no kloim, there are no curtains of the Mishkan. Delo tema kevan shenestalku kloim yesh kan psul yotze. You shouldn't say that since there are no kloim, therefore there's a psula disqualification of yotze. That we do not say, because again, afa pisha nasa, even though it's traveling, ohel moed, who it is considered the ohel moed. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Rav Huna says that Rav says, the Shinui and Uschos says, some have the gears of Rav Chisda. Amar Rav Chisda Amar Rav, that Rav Chisda says that Rav says, Mizbeach shel Shiloh shel avonim hoya. The Mizbeach that was in Shiloh was made of stones. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, again, the Shinui and Uschos has Tanya Nami Hachi. We learned the same thing in a Brisa. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, again, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Ma Talmud Lomer, why does the Pasuk say, Avonim, Avonim, Avonim? It says Avonim 3 times, Shalosh Ba'amim 3 times. It means to say Echad shel Shiloh. It means to say one is in reference to Shiloh, V'echad shel Nov v'Givon, and one is in reference to Nov and Givon, U'Beis Olamim, and one is in reference to Beis Olamim, meaning to say the Beis HaMikdash. And Rashi explains, Avonim Gimel Pa'amim, again it says Avonim 3 times, and Mizbach Avonim Lo Sonif, Avonim Shlemos Tivna, those are the 3 times. And Nov v'Givon, Rashi says, Nov and Givon Chad Choshev Lahu, that's considered all like one, that's the 3 times, it's not considered 2 separate areas. The Shneihem and Bama, Ve'enon Kedoshim, because both in Nov and Givon, it was a Bama, it was an external altar, and it did not have that holiness. Again, the point over here is that in Shiloh, in Nov and Givon, and in Beis Olamim, in the Beis HaMikdash, it was a mizbeach made out of stones. And the Gemara continues, Mesev Rav Acha Barami. Rav Acha Barami asks a question from the following brisa. Shinui and Uschos has Rav Achdavoy Barami. He asks a question from the following brisa. Eish sheyorda min hashamayim, the fire that came down from heaven b'mei Moshe in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, lo nistalka mi'al mizbeach hanechoshes, it did not remove itself from the kavra mizbeach. Again, the mizbeach of nechoshes was in the times of Moshe. It didn't remove itself from that mizbeach ela b'mei Shlomo, only in the days of Shlomo HaMelech. Ve'esha yorda b'mei Shlomo lo nistalka, and the fire that came down in the days of Shlomo HaMelech, that wasn't removed. Ad sheba Menashe v'silka, until Menashe came and he removed it. And so the Gemara asks its question, V'imisa, now if it's true, meaning to say if it is true that already in the times of Shiloh it was a stone mizbeach, it was a different mizbeach that was much before Shlomo HaMelech, so meikaruhu distalik lei, so really from much earlier it was already already removed this fire that came down from heaven in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu. And Rashi explains, Lo nistalka shebeshas hamasos kofen olav pesachter umanichen osav mekoma. Rashi says when they were traveling, where did the fire go then? They covered it over and it stayed in its place. It was only removed, Ela b'mei Shlomo was only removed in the days of Shlomo HaMelech, shenistalka misham lemizbeach avonim shoasa Shlomo, because the fire left that copper mizbeach and went to the mizbeach of stone that Shlomo HaMelech made. Ad sheba Menashe v'silka garas, until Menashe came and removed it. That's the proper text. And so the question is, Vim Isa, if it's true again that the Mizbeach in Shiloh already was Shel Avonim, so Meikaruhu Distalik, it already was removed earlier, Mishahukam HaMishkan B'Shiloh, from the time that the Mishkan was put up in Shiloh, Uvanu Mizbech Avonim, and they built the Mizbeach of Avonim, Huzkukol Lehistalik, Mizbeach Shel Nechoshes, so the fire is going to be removed at that point from the Mizbeach that was of Nechoshes. That's the question of the Gemara. And the Gemara continues and answers, Huda Amar Kerebi Nasan, he says, meaning Rav Huna Amarav or Rav Chisda Amarav, who made the statement that the Mizbeach of Shiloh was made of stones, this brisa that we're bringing does go against that statement, but he follows the Tana Rabbi Nasan. Rabbi Nasan says also that the Mizbeach of Shiloh was made of stone. The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, Rabbi Nasan Omer, Rabbi Nasan says, Mizbeach shel Shiloh shel Nechoshes haya, the Mizbeach of Shiloh was made of copper, but cholol, but it was hollow, umole avonim, and it was filled with stones. And again, that's what Rav Huna Amarav, who said the Mizbeach of Shiloh was made of stones, was following this Tana of Nasan. And Rashi explains, Hu da Amar Rav Huna da Amar Rabbi Nasan. Again, Rav Huna says like Rabbi Nasan. Now the obvious question over here is, we already had a Tana that says that it was made of stones. It says, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said, Avonim, Avonim, Avonim. It says 3 times, Echad shel Shiloh, V'echad shel Nov and Givon, and 1 in Beis Olamim. And so Rashi says, V'hadalo Amrinon Hu da Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Why don't we just say that Rav Huna Amar Rav is saying like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov? The reason is, Mishum Rabbi Nasan Hu da Shaminan le Behedya, Ma'isa Hoya, because Rabbi Nasan, we hear this explicitly that this is how it was. From Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov all we really know is that it was kosher. It was okay that it be made out of stones, but we don't necessarily know that it actually was made out of stones. That's why we're bringing Rabbi Nasan over here. And the Gemara continues with another answer of Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar. Of Nachman bar Yitzchak says, what's the explanation of this brisa again that we brought, that the fire that came down from heaven in the times of Moshe was not removed until the times of Shlomo? My lo nistalka, what does it mean it was not removed? It actually means lo nistalka levatala. It means that it was not removed in the sense of batala, in the sense that it was completely nullified. Rashi explains lo nistalka levatala shetei betela mimizbech hanechoshes lagamri. It wasn't completely bottled from the Mizbeach that was made out of copper. What that means to say is that it could be this brisa agrees that already at the time of Shiloh it was a Mizbeach made out of stones, it was a new Mizbeach, but there still was a Mizbeach hanechoshes, and that Mizbeach hanechoshes, that still had the fire in some sense. As the Gemara now continues and explains, Maihi, what exactly does that mean? Rabbanon Amri, the Rabbanon, they say, Shaviva have a mishadra, that it sent forth some sparks. Rashi explains, Shaviva have a mishadra kishayim aktirin, al shel avonim, when they would burn things on the mizbeach of stones, hayu zekim v'lohavos yotzos me'et shamayim shal mizbeach hanechoshes shel Moshe. There were these sparks that were going from the fire of heaven on the mizbeach hanechoshes sha'af hu munach sham, that it was placed over there as well. That mizbeach was still there, it was still near that area, and so there were some sparks. That's what it means to say lo nistalka, somewhat that fire was still there. And the Gemara continues with another explanation. What does it mean that the fire did not depart the Mizbeach of Nechoshes in a way that it was nullified? Rav Papa Amar, Rav Papa says, Ushbiza having nakat, it was like a guest. V'zimnin hacha, v'zimnin hacha. Sometimes it was here, meaning sometimes it was on the Mizbeach of Nechoshes, and sometimes it was on the Mizbeach that was made of stones. And the Gemara continues, Tanan Hasam, we learned in a Mishnah over there. This is a Mishnah in Meseches Midos. It says, Uchisha'olu b'nei hagola, when those from the exile came up, it means in the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, they made the Mizbeach a little larger. Hosifu olav dalet amos min hadorom, they added 4 amos from the south. V'dalet amos min hamayrav, and they added 4 amos from the west. Kimin gamma, in the shape of the letter gamma, meaning at a right angle. They added on to the Mizbeach. And the Gemara says, my time, and what was the reason for this? Amar Rav Yosef said, Mishum de lo sipek, because it wasn't enough, it wasn't large enough. There were too many offerings at the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, so they had to make the Mizbeach larger. Amar le Abaye said to him, he said to Rav Yosef, how could that be? Hashta now, Mikdash Rishon, by the first Beis HaMikdash, Tichsiv Bey, it's written by the first Beis HaMikdash, Yehuda v'Yisrael Rabim Kechol Asher al Hayom. It says that Yehuda and Yisrael, there were very many of them. It was a large population, and sipek, and yet it was enough. The Mizbeach was sufficient. So Mikdash Sheni, so when we're talking about the second Beis HaMikdash, Tichsiv Bey Kol HaKol Ke'echad Arba Ribo, it says the entire congregation was just 40,000. Lo sipek, it's not enough. That doesn't make any sense. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Le, he said back to him, Rav Yosef said back to Abaye, Hasam over there, Eish Shel Shamayim Mesayaton, in the first Beis HaMikdash, the fire of heaven, it helped. It was able to allow all of those karbanos to be consumed properly. But Hachabot over here, Ein Eish Shel Shamayim Mesayaton, they didn't have the fire from heaven to assist them. And the Gemara continues, Kiyasa Ravin Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. When Ravin came, he said that Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi said, Mishum bar kapara, in the name of bar kapara, Shisin hosifu, that what they actually added on was they added on to the Mizbeach by the Shisin. The Shisin were the drains which took from the libations, so that they added on. And Rashi explains, Shisin hosifu keren ma'ravis duromis, the corner, the southwestern corner, hosifu l'mashchal adarim u'l'mayrav. Again, they added on that towards the south and towards the west. Sheshamayu menaschin esachim, because it was over there that they would pour the libations. Kedamrina b'masisin l'kamon, like we'll say in the Mishnah later on. Uvemei Shlomo hayakamin bor karoi eitzel hamizbeach biosa zavis leired hanesachim besocho. At the times of Shlomo, these holes were like next to the mizbeach. It was like a pit next to the mizbeach, and so the nesachim would be poured down the side of the mizbeach. V'yarden min hamizbeach u'laritzpa v'shos and sham. They would go down the mizbeach to the floor, and they would drain over there. V'heim koltu oso habor l'socha mizbeach. But what they did was they made it that the bor was actually within, so to speak, the mizbeach. The mizbeach was over that pit. V'yasu nekavim kenegdon, and they made these holes corresponding to that. Barosh ha-mizbeach, at the top of the mizbeach, leired ha-nesachim sham, in order for the nesachim to go down in that fashion. That's what they added on to the mizbeach. And the Gemara continues and explains again, Shisin Hosifu, they added on by the Shisin, because Meikara Savar, originally they thought, Mizbach Adama, it says it has to be a Mizbach Adama. What does that mean? Shu Atum Ba'adama means it has to be totally filled with earth. As Rashi explains, Atum Ba'adama means Shalo Yehei Cholol, meaning it shouldn't be hollow at all. And so therefore they understood they can't have a situation of a Mizbeach with holes at the top where it's going to be draining down through the Mizbeach, because that would not be considered Atum Ba'adama. Ulvasov Savar, but then at the end they held that Shasiya Kachila, that the drinking of the Mizbeach should be like the eating of the Mizbeach. The eating of the Mizbeach refers to the karbonos on the Mizbeach, and the drinking refers to the libations. And Rashi explains, Shasiya Kachila, Ma'achila Misachelis b'Mizbeach, just like the Achila happens on the Mizbeach itself is where it's consumed. Af Shasiya Tivla b'Mizbeach, so too, by the drinking, by the libations, it should be through the Mizbeach itself. It should be absorbed through the Mizbeach itself. And the Gemara continues, Umay Mizbach Adama. According to that, how do we interpret the pasuk of Mizbach Adama? That simply means Shehu Mechuber Ba'adama, that it should be attached in the earth. Shelo Yivnenu Lo Agabe Kipim, that it shouldn't be built over arches. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf 61b Amud Aleph.